We begin in South Korea, where President Yoon Suk-yeol has lifted martial law just hours after declaring it. Yoon reversed his decision after facing a major backlash from lawmakers and protesters. Crowds gathered outside Parliament as lawmakers inside voted unanimously against the measure. Troops were sent to the building and forced their way inside, but were withdrawn again shortly after. President Yoon announced martial law in a late-night address, accusing the opposition of what he called anti-state activities. He announced the reversal in another televised speech just hours later.
After the National Assembly's demand to lift martial law troops have been withdrawn. I will accept the National Assembly's demand and lift martial law through a cabinet meeting.
For more, let's now speak to Katharine Moon. She is a professor of political science and chair of Asian Studies at Wellesley College. So help us make sense of this. Thank you for joining us. So help us make sense of this. Why did the president impose and then lift the martial law?
It's very hard to make sense of this, to be fully honest here. We don't really know why President Yoon declared martial law late at night, and it only lasted 2.5 hours. The National Assembly quickly gathered, and the leader of the opposition Democratic Party, as well as the leader of his own conservative People's Power Party, worked together to unite National Assembly members who showed up in the middle of the night and unanimously voted to annul and revoke this martial law declaration. It's possible that he felt so pressed by his inability to actually govern, and that might have caused this declaration. There are people in Korea who say that his wife, who has been covered with political scandals even before his election. It started in the campaign back in 2021, 2022. She has continued to gather media and public coverage because of allegations regarding stock price manipulation, bribes through the receival of luxury goods, and a whole slate of other accusations. The Democratic Party members in the National Assembly were intent on trying to get a special counsel or investigator to investigate the situation. And President Yoon also has such a low favorability ranking, down at 17% or so, and has not been able to be effective in any way. So I think his own personal and political weakness made him act in this way, but it really does not make sense. It's such a drastic reaction to whatever troubles he felt he was having.
And as you were just saying there, lawmakers from his own party voted against the declaration. Were they bowing to public pressure, or did Yoon overplay his hand?
I think he overplayed his hand. I don't think he even thought about his hand. It's really hard to understand what prompted him. And I would not say that the National Assembly members bowed to public pressure. I mean, people were in bed sleeping for the most part, but the National Assembly members, they took action right away. And some even climbed over the fences and walls surrounding the National Assembly building because the police were blockading it. But they wanted to get into the building in order to do their job. And it's really, the public came out early in the morning and then later today, and obviously expressed their deep discontent and worries about what is happening to their democracy.
Yeah, and as you're saying there, the public is still on their feet in Seoul. So how do you see the situation playing out now that martial law has been rescinded? Could we see a continued escalation?
I don't think there will be a public escalation. I think the president is and will continue to be under fire to resign. And I am sure that the National Assembly will be proceeding with impeachment processes or procedures. The public will be clamoring for resignation, impeachment, and accountability through law. So I think he's in a lot of trouble. I don't know how he can possibly hold on to his position. What's also interesting is that he tried to lean on his cabinet in order to follow a procedure or protocol to actually lift martial law when he took no such action prior to it. He didn't really deliberate with anybody except for the defense minister, it seems, and caught his entire government for the most part off guard. But his cabinet members are also in a very insecure position. He had about a week ago already announced at the end of November that he was planning to do a cabinet reshuffling. So there is a lot of unrest, a lot of uncertainty coming from the presidency itself. And we'll see in the next few days and weeks how things continue to either clear up or possibly the infighting between the parties and within his own People's Power Party. I think it's going to be pretty intense.
Yeah, we are seeing some really chaotic times in political Seoul right now. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. That was Katharine Moon at Wellesley College. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Our journalist Fabian Kretschmer is in the South Korean capital, Seoul. Welcome, Fabian. Quite a night for South Korea. Just walk us through what happened.
Yeah, really a turbulent night. Now it's 5 a.m. local time. So what has happened in the evening or the late evening, President Yoon Suk-yeol basically declared emergency martial law. Now, just for context, during the military dictatorship in South Korea, during the 60s, 70s, even early 80s, this was quite common, and it was always justified with the threat of North Korea. But since South Korea held its first democratic elections in 1987, there was no martial law ever. So this is really an unprecedented experience, and also very surprising. Nobody really saw it coming, and President Yoon Suk-yeol basically said that he needs to protect the constitutional order, he needs to protect the freedom, and he accused the opposition, the left-leaning opposition, of being pro-North Korean, and he wanted to eradicate pro-North Korean forces. I'm quoting him here now. And then there were a lot of demonstrators gathering in front of the South Korean parliament, the National Assembly, and they demanded an impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol, demanding him to step down. And inside the parliament, the members of the parliament were gathering, but actually the exit and entry was blocked by security forces. I mean, I just came from the parliament and there were quite a lot of police forces. I didn't see military with my own eyes, but apparently at some point there was also military. But actually the situation was not as tense as you might expect. There was small scuffles between demonstrators and police, but actually nothing too big, I would say. Anyway, now there was the final, or at least for now, the final plot point that President Yoon Suk-yeol now said after a vote by parliamentarians that he will respect this vote to basically refrain from the martial law and that he will lift it. He hasn't done so yet, but he said he will lift it.
Okay, so has everyone gone home? Is this, whatever it was, is it over now?
Well, I wouldn't call it yet over, but at least there's now an open path or a possibility for a peaceful solution of this crisis. I mean, look, I mean, for example, the German embassy here sent out a notice that, be careful, refrain from going to political places because the security situation is tense. I would say now probably the protesters at least have achieved what they demanded, and I think there are still people there and also actually quite cheerful, the demonstrators in front of the parliamentary building, because I think one of their goals is that the president will step down. And I mean, he has not said so, but I mean, many experts tell me that what President Yoon Suk-yeol has done by declaring martial law is basically political suicide. I don't see any way how he could politically survive this this fiasco, because I mean this was really a radical step. And let me maybe also explain, because from the outside it might look that maybe North Korea will exploit the situation, or that there's really some form of collusion between the South Korean opposition and North Korea. But President Yoon Suk-yeol has not delivered any evidence. I think it was really a very vague criticism against the opposition. So this is really important to keep in mind.
Okay, so political suicide, he'll probably step down. But people are going to ask, well, what was he thinking? What was behind this radical step, as you call it?
Yeah, of course, I have to speculate a little bit, but because he didn't provide any concrete evidence to his claims, I think many observers are arguing that it was also domestically motivated. Let me explain this. President Yoon Suk-yeol was really suffering from extremely low popularity. I mean, his rates were very, very low, and he had some scandals, domestic scandals, one also revolving around his wife, and there were some corruption allegations and so on. So apparently he must have thought that, you know, he could survive this mission by declaring martial law, and that maybe this would also distract attention. This is, I mean, just speculation, but I mean, it would provide at least some form of explanation. And again, I'm speculating here. For me, it looks as he will not politically survive this the next days. But I mean, again, this is only my speculation.
Martial law usually involves the military. Where were they? Were they out on the streets while all this was going on? And whose side were they on, if I can put it that way?
Well, I mean, this is really hard to say. At least with my own eyes, I didn't see the military. I only saw a heavy police presence and also plainclothes police officers. But apparently, according to news reports, at some point the military was also present around the parliamentary building. But I mean, they've remained calm. They were peaceful, so to speak. They did not escalate. So, I mean, they didn't need to be on either side. But at least from my impression, a lot of the riot police, those are young South Korean men just doing their military service. I mean, I could not imagine that they would be, if it would really have been escalating, that they would have been basically forced to go against their own people. I mean, this would be hard to imagine. But thank God it really stayed relatively calm. There are no casualties, and the situation was really not as intense as you might have expected.
Unusual times, and we thank you for speculating based on your knowledge of what's going on there. We have an unpopular president who is probably going to step down. If that happens, what happens next? Are there likely to be elections, or does his deputy take over? What do you think?
Well, I mean, based on previous experience, we know that the former president, also the conservative President Park Geun-hye, she was basically, or was forced to step down. She was impeached after a lot of demonstrations. I mean, basically for months and months, every Saturday, there were big anti-government demonstrations. And actually, this is something that I would also like to add to the situation right now. In the last weeks, every Saturday, those anti-government demonstrations have again started to emerge. Not in very huge numbers, but they were building up. And that maybe was also an incentive for President Yoon Suk-yeol to make this radical move because he saw what was coming. I mean, there were already a lot of calls within the people, within the population, demanding an impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. I mean, that was always a scenario that could have happened, that, you know, really an anti-government movement would form within the population. So there are many scenarios, but I mean, I'm speculating here. I would guess that there will be at least some elections in the not too distant future.
Okay, thank you, Fabian. Fabian Kretschmer in Seoul on a turbulent few hours. Thank you.